Do you want to bust your sales quota? Do you want to join the ranks of top 1% high-tech sellers? The Top 1% Sellers Factory podcast gives you the insights and the tools to help you achieve your sales greatness. The podcast features sales and services professionals, leaders, and experts to give you the edge you're looking for. Here's your host, Seddeek.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Top 1% Sellers Factory podcast. My guest today, Leslie Horton, is an amazing professional. She has a lot of experience working with a lot of organizations. And most recently, she's also been a coach, and she works with her clients on working on a number of areas. And I'm going to reserve the detail here until we actually get a chance to hear from Leslie. But we'll get started by looking at giving Leslie an opportunity to kind of share with us her background and experience, and then we'll delve deeper into questions that are designed specifically to help a lot of you, our listeners, in busting your quota and really succeeding at sales. So with that, Leslie, if you could just give us a brief overview of your career and where you are focused on today.
Well, first of all, Ash, it's a pleasure to join you on this podcast. Thank you so much for having me here.
Absolutely.
I am the owner of the Unleash Success program. And for the past 10 years, I've been working with a variety of business owners and high-level professionals across Northern California. Prior to that, I was in Silicon Valley, where I worked with a variety of corporations from Fortune 50 down to small emerging companies.
Yes.
And I was a finance executive and a business strategist. So I invariably found myself working very closely with the CEO and mentoring the CEO, as CEOs have a lot of stress on their shoulders. They're trying to please the board of directors, the investors, and other stakeholders in the company. And they're trying to motivate everybody around them and keep that happy face all the time. When inside they might be feeling fearful, uncertain, worried.
Yes.
And so they would come in and close the door and we could really just talk. And I loved that aspect of the job more than anything else.
That's amazing.
So I guess you could say most of my career, I really was coaching.
Yes.
Although at the time I didn't actively recognize it as such. In late 2004, I moved to the Sacramento region. I continue to have a network in Silicon Valley, and I've cultivated a good network up in the Sacramento region. And I've enjoyed very much becoming a success coach and working with a wide variety of professionals, and many of them are involved with sales and business development.
And that's really what excited me when I talked with you, because I did not know. And then once you shared with me that some of your clientele are actually sales professionals, I definitely thought that we had an opportunity to benefit our audience. And I'd love us to then perhaps maybe talk broadly about some of the key challenges that you see some of the people you work with have. And then we'll start looking at, the kind of advice and interventions that you work with them on. And I'd love to give our audience a sense of what that looks like. Because I think a lot of people sometimes want to work with a coach, but they don't know what it feels like and how to go about it.
Well, you're right. A lot of people, they may not have ever worked with a coach, or if they did, it might have been for a particular issue that wasn't even related to their professional life.
Yes.
And there are many, many forms of coaching. I'm a business mentor and a success coach.
Yes.
And so in that capacity, I can do one of two things. As a business mentor, I can provide people with how-to solutions.
Yes.
How to be more successful in business, how to hire a better team, how to have a better pipeline, how to have more sales, how to have more confidence when you're getting in front of other people.
Yes.
It's a how-to kind of business.
Yes.
Success coaching, on the other hand, is a blend of how to and why not to do things. And it addresses our conscious mind and our subconscious mind.
Fascinating. I think that's an amazing mix that you just shared with me, because I can definitely see your corporate background, the kind of conversations that you've had, and the access that you've had uncovering, as you said, the business issues and looking at how to do those, and then also then working with these individuals on their own leadership management challenge, which had to do with their own self-perception, their own capabilities. So as to your point, as you were saying earlier, that was coaching, and then you came out and now you're doing your business and success coach, and I can definitely see the two angles. I love how you position the difference between the two. And I'd love for us to continue that stream, because a lot of the sales professionals today, there's always that challenge around business acumen and really coming across as a strategic, trusted advisor. So they need to be strong in that area, and they also need to come across as confident and capable and being able to really present themselves really well. So let's take that second piece about how sales professionals in your own mind, and I'm sure you've dealt with some of them on the coaching side and also as a client, where do you see the key challenges facing them today? Again, even in reference to the conversation you're having with him as you're coaching them.
Well, one of the things I encounter a lot, Ash, is that people will go into any kind of a business development or sales meeting, yes, and the strategy they use when they're sitting down with someone is the strategy that would work perfectly on them if someone were trying to help them make a purchase decision.
Yes.
And so the strategy will work with anyone who's just like them each and every time.
Yes, exactly.
But we usually encounter people who are different than us and who would require a completely different strategy in order to get that happy, successful outcome.
Yes.
So I encounter that a lot. One of the things I can teach clients to do is how to recognize the right strategy to use when they're sitting down with someone. There's a technique to use to create that awareness.
Yes.
And a lot of salespeople go in and they almost have a pre-prepared dialogue in their mind.
Yes.
And they sit down in the chair, they ask a few questions, and then off they go with that pre-formed dialogue.
Yes.
And it works perfectly on them.
Exactly. And I've seen a lot of advice around trying to uncover what would work with that client.
Yes.
So how do you turn around them and then help them understand that there's a shift that they have to make?
We start talking about strategy elicitation.
Yes.
And that's something that is very powerful. Very few people understand it or how to do it.
Yes.
Another primary challenge when people sit down at a table is if they understand the personality of the person sitting across from them.
That makes a lot of sense.
A lot of times we assume our personality is going to be very similar to the other person's personality, but there's at least 16 combinations of different personalities that we encounter all the time.
Yes.
And being able to recognize fairly quickly which personality is across from you at the table is very valuable to you.
Yes.
So you can adapt accordingly.
And I gather you're looking at the whole concept. If for example, I'm talking with an analytical buyer, I have to sort of present information that really matches that profile. Is that similar to what you're looking at?
That's part of it.
Yes.
I've met a lot of people who are very analytical.
Yes.
And I have quite a few clients who are. And so I adapt my personality when I'm with them.
That makes a lot of sense.
So that it resonates more effectively for them.
And that's when you were talking about strategy elicitation, when that was part of sort of trying to uncover exactly the kind of profile you're dealing with.
The personality and how they would be most effectively engaged in making a decision. And that is a strategy. And we all have a different one that works excellently for us.
How?
And so it's uncovering for the other person.
Exactly.
What works best for them. And it begins with understanding their personality. Some people want to cut to the chase very quickly.
Yes.
And you start seeing body language within a minute or two. They just want to go down into those details and see the bottom line.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then you have other people who emotionally want to break bread. They want to connect. They want to understand your perspective on a variety of topics.
Yes.
And if you try to cut to the chase with them, they'll probably conclude very quickly, I don't really want to be around this person.
Very interesting.
And that would be the end of it.
Yeah, it's much more relationship building for them than it is a transaction.
Yes. And it's recognizing the difference between them. Some people hate to make decisions. And anyone in sales has been around people like that. And you can provide them with every kind of information you can possibly imagine. And they still are unable to make a decision.
Yes.
Well, I can teach people very quickly how to determine if that's going to be the case. Because they're never going to make a decision. They don't want to.
Exactly.
And wouldn't it be wonderful to know that earlier rather than later?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of the time when I look at, let's say, a client executive managing a large account, typically it's an ongoing exercise. I mean, they have opportunities where they meet with those customer representatives. Some of them are the decision makers or the influencers. Do you advise them then to sort of be very conscious on their campaign of uncovering the styles that they're working with, so that when they have a critical meeting where it's the pitch for that sale where multi-million dollars are on the table, what do you advise them to sort of get them conscious on that, so that it's not necessarily per that one meeting, but perhaps there's a longer journey that they are on?
I think from the very first meeting, they should start understanding who they're dealing with, the personality type,
yes,
and adapting to it from the very beginning. And then when they meet additional people who might be involved in the process, trying to do the same type of thing with each of them. Because how many times have we been at a table and there's a variety of people around that table? Well, they're all different personalities. And perception is projection.
Yes,
exactly. So what they're hearing and what they're experiencing is through their own eyes.
Yes.
And so if we can relate to that, we can gauge our conversation in a way that's going to be very effective for each person at the table.
Makes a lot of sense. And then in terms of, I really want to go back to, when these account managers come to you, some of them come to you for coaching. That's definitely, I'm sure, is a critical component. But when you go back to this whole concept of success coaching, sometimes there's stuff internal that you have to sort of pull out and uncover, because sometimes that's what's at play. I'd love to kind of get a window into some of that, if you don't mind.
I would be delighted to share that. Thank you for asking.
Sure.
We all have this very powerful subconscious mind that is running the show almost all of the time.
Yes.
But because it's unconscious, we're not consciously aware of it.
Yes.
But nevertheless, it's in control most of the time.
Yes.
And the best way to tell what's going on is looking at, first of all, our habits, because almost all of our habits are unconscious. When you first start a new habit, you're very consciously aware of it. Okay, I need to do this a certain way. All right, now I've got it.
Yes.
But once that becomes a habit, you don't think about it anymore. Imagine if you were trying to learn how to drive a car every time you got in one.
Exactly.
That would take all your energy.
Absolutely.
So if we look at our habits, for example, if you say, okay, I'm definitely going to turn right here, but you don't. You go straight or you turn left.
Yes.
And afterwards, you're scratching your head and you're saying, why did I do that?
Yeah.
It was a habit. And your habits are guided entirely by your subconscious mind. So we have layers of our subconscious mind. From our habits, we move up to our skills, from our skills to our beliefs, from our beliefs to our values, and from our values up to our identity. And one of the things you and I had discussed before the podcast today was motivation.
Yes.
We have vast reservoirs of motivation inside of us. The challenge is in knowing what kind, in what situation is in play. Some people will say, all right, I'm full of motivation. Well, we all are, but what kind?
Yes.
There's more than one kind. And the ideal combination of both kinds of motivation is 70% towards something and 30% away from something.
Yes, yeah.
It's that away from that makes us be aware of any barriers or challenges in a situation, but it's the toward that gives us that energy and that confidence to keep moving forward, even when someone might be saying, well, I'm not sure, I don't know, maybe
Yes.
no budget.
Exactly, yeah.
And it makes us very resourceful. And a lot of people may have away from motivation that is beyond that 30%.
Yeah.
And so they approach a sales quota, and if they hit it, then suddenly they have no more motivation whatsoever, even if they could get double incentives, triple incentives,
Yes.
beyond their regular commission program. And their bosses are scratching their heads and saying, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Why aren't they motivated by more money?
They could do more, exactly, yeah.
And then the person is coasting until the cycle starts over again. Well, that's because they're away motivated from doing more.
I see. So that's interesting, because I know some of the people listening are probably sales managers, and they're wondering exactly how do I fix that situation, because there's a whole lot more money on the table. There's sometimes more wallet share on some accounts, and they're definitely interested in making sure that account manager is bringing in 150% of quota or 200.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe beyond that.
Exactly.
And I encountered that recently with one of my clients,
Yeah.
who is a little bit lacking in confidence, and he walked into a referral opportunity, and the referral could have easily given him, triple, quadruple what he asked for.
Yeah.
He went for the lowest number possible.
Wow.
And afterwards, he was saying, why did I do that?
Yes.
Well, it was because of the motivation and the
Yeah.
confidence.
Feeling, yeah.
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 He didn't go for the pedal to the metal.
Yes.
It was like, okay, what's the least amount I can ask for and maybe get it?
Got it. Very interesting. So then your advice then, or your coaching then, has to do with being conscious of that, the away from and the toward, and what they believe is sort of the race finish line, and the fact that there could be several other finish lines that they should be thinking of. How do we bring consciousness to that?
Well, through a series of techniques that I use as a success coach,
Got it.
I help people to do a mental shift because we all are at some set point in every area of our lives.
Yes.
And every single set point has got a whole cluster of habits around it. So it's not just one thing, it's a series of things. And all of them are in play in that area of their life. So in sales, there are many components that are guiding their behavior each and every day.
Yeah.
And how they're feeling about what they're doing with each of those habits.
Fantastic. Fascinating to me, because I can definitely only just imagine for that account manager or for the manager trying to work with all of that. A lot of the time, they are not equipped to do it themselves or their managers. So that actually makes me a bit curious. Do you sometimes actually get calls from, let's say, a sales manager who says, to your point, I've got this guy or gal who is an amazing salesperson, but once they hit their quota, it's almost like everything has fizzled out, and to your point, they just wait for the next cycle? Or do you typically just get the call directly from that individual, saying, I'm not performing, I think I can do better, I don't know what's causing that?
It can be both.
Okay.
I've worked with people who are managing people,
Yeah.
and they're scratching their head and they're saying, I've got a really talented person who could do so much more. Why are they not living up to it?
Yes.
And we'll talk about what the perception is of the manager first, and then I'll want to talk to the individual and hear from them what they are seeing and experiencing in the process. And that conversation is invaluable to me in getting those additional insights of what might be going on for that person.
Yes.
We had a group meeting today with a number of my clients, and one of them brought up that very topic.
Yeah. Yeah, because at Cisco, we were always trying to figure out how can we grow these accounts that were bringing in $50 million and make them $70, $80 million, because the customer was spending, to your point earlier, spending $1 billion, right? And Cisco's only getting a portion of that on that particular account. And the question was, how can you grow that wallet share? And it's a simple question to ask, but a very complex answer, because there are so many different ways that you need to be working on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wish there was just one simple sentence that I could tell you on that, but it's many different factors.
Yeah.
And in talking to someone and observing what they're doing and what they're not doing,
Yes.
then you start digging below the surface and finding out what's really happening inside.
Yes. Yeah, it's getting very interesting now, because I'd love us to do a couple of things. One, let's say this account manager is listening to us, him or her. I'd love for you, if you don't mind, giving that person maybe 3 key points that they can use to assess whether or not that's happening right now for them, and some of the things that they can do to fix it at their level. Because I know people can work with you and other coaches to do that on a bigger scale. And then I'd like to come back and do the same thing for the sales manager. Again, give them a sample of what could possibly happen when you work with Leslie, and then share with them a bit more about what that would look like if we were to do this on a much more formal scale. I think I just love them to get some sampling.
Of course. Well, looking at an individual sales contributor,
Yes.
And everybody's in the business of sales, whether they recognize it or not. We all are.
Yes.
What I typically do when I first meet with someone is I ask what their definition of success is.
Yes.
And it's never been the same answer for 2 people. And so I try to hear what that is. And
Yeah.
it can be around work. It can be around their life. It can be around their finances. It can be around their relationships. It can be around their health. It can be around anything in the whole circle of life. And so I hear what that definition of success is for them. And then I ask, where are you right now with your own definition of success?
Yes.
And that will cause people to take pause and really think, where am I right now?
The delta,
Am I where I thought I would be at this point in my life?
Yeah.
Have I achieved my dreams and goals?
Yes.
And for most people, the answer would be probably not.
Yes.
And so it causes self-reflection.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then the next thing I typically do is have people take an assessment. I have a variety of proprietary assessments,
Yes.
so that I can learn a lot more about their motivation, their behaviors, their limiting beliefs, their limiting decisions. And that will help me then to work with them directly and dial in what needs to be changed.
And I would imagine that you tackle some quick wins initially. And if that's the case, how do you would typically do? Because I know some of these assessments would just bring so much about that person that you don't know where to start, right? Do you have a path to a quick win initially?
It depends on the nature of the issue.
Okay.
If it's been a long-term challenge, it's going to take a lot longer than if it's been something that's happened over the last 90 days.
Okay.
Let's say someone's been the top performer throughout their career,
Yes.
and then something's happened, and very recently it's just going downward.
Yeah.
Then that's going to be a much easier and faster fix than somebody who says, for the last 10 years, I know I've been way below my potential.
That's a bigger amount of work that needs to happen.
Yes, and they could be brilliant. In fact, most people have amazing talents and capabilities. And if they were empowered fully,
Yes.
they would take off like a rocket ship.
Absolutely. And I'm sitting here as I know you of course, you just said all of us are in sales, right?
Yes.
And I feel a part of that, and I know our listeners are, and I've seen them, and I know a lot of them, there is a bit of impatience with being a salesperson, that you want things very fast, right?
Yes.
Even when it comes to a coaching effort, right?
Uh-huh.
So how do you sort of say, Ash, I will work with you, but here's how much this is going to take and why you need to be patient?
Well, everybody's different. Some people will take big strides very rapidly.
Yes.
And do everything they need to do because they're totally committed. If someone comes to me and says, I will do whatever it takes to achieve this outcome,
yes,
that's a very different situation than someone who says, oh, I think I'd like to try this. Exactly. I want to see how it turns out.
Yes.
When people say, I'm totally committed, I can move with them very rapidly. But they have to truly mean it.
Yes, exactly. So you don't want a tentative commitment. You want a very solid, deliberate commitment to engage and take action. That makes a lot of sense to me because that's the critical factor behind achieving results in most cases. Let's go back to that sales manager sitting and listening to this conversation. And again, you want to kind of go back even to that person that you were talking about where they could do more, but they only got the least amount that they can get away with. But the fact that there's so much potential that can happen on an account. How can we coach that sales manager to do with the account manager?
Well, that's the other side of the coin, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
For the particular client in question, he's got an amazing salesman who's underperforming right now. But when you talk to him, his ability to get inside doors is astonishing. And the upside and the opportunities are almost breathtaking. And yet, he hesitates. And he doesn't move forward the way he should. So the sales manager's going, what do I need to do to get this guy in high gear?
Yes.
Well, the reality is none of us can cause another person to change their behavior.
Exactly.
Unless they're under coercion or duress. That's the only way. So what is causing that person to hold back, to not move forward confidently and close the opportunities?
Yes.
The only way to determine that is to sit down with that individual and find out what's happening inside them.
Yes.
Because they don't know. Most people, if you ask them on the conscious level, why aren't you selling 3 times more than you are today? They would say, I have no idea. Do you think you could sell 3 times more? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Okay, well then why? I don't know. I'm doing my best. I'll hear people say that. I'm doing my best.
Yes.
What is your best? And then they'll start describing it. It's like, I know that's not that person's best.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So definitely seek to understand first. And I think a lot of managers may not necessarily know how to deal with that second layer of, you're basically saying your conscious best versus what's happening inside. It could be issues in their own private lives, or to your point, maybe their thought process about where they are in their careers that could be sort of impacting them. So how do we get out of that funk? How do we help the manager help the AM get out of that funk, if you will?
It's almost counterintuitive, but one of the things most managers do when they see performance not measuring up to what they want it to be,
yes,
is they tend to apply lots of pressure and fear. Right?
Yeah.
And most people, when you apply pressure and fear, rather than it causing them to step up, it actually makes them so uncomfortable, their performance will go downward, not upward.
Even more, yeah.
And so it accelerates the problem.
Yeah.
And yet that is a very common reaction of most managers. They say, okay, I don't like this performance. I'm now going to really dial in some pressure because then I want that person to step up their game.
Yes.
And all that creates is fear and away from motivation.
So what do you do then on the flip side of that?
You encourage them and ask what you can do to help them.
Yes.
To become better. Letting them know that they have amazing capabilities. You have every confidence that they have the talent, they have the innate skills, and you want to be supportive in their journey to success.
Yes.
Which is a very different message.
Absolutely. And then you have to have, again, the patience as the manager, that you have a window of time where you're going to give this a very solid opportunity for it to actually happen.
Yes. And I would never tell someone, hey, you've got 30 days or you're going to be out the door.
Yes.
Because the minute you say those words, that person's already saying, okay, I'm going to be out the door. I'm going to start looking.
Exactly, and which exactly what you said. It's counterintuitive to what you want to accomplish, because they could be a high performer who's just experiencing a funk for one reason or another, and you want to uncover that, fix that out, and then they are back on their way of performing as highly as they can. It sounds to me then that that part of your work sometimes is even helping these managers understand how to coach correctly, so they can get the best results, right?
Yes, and managers always look at behavior. That is where they go, and that's where they go every single time. And they'll immediately pull up the metrics, and they'll say, okay, I wanted this person to be performing at this level, but I see they're performing at this level. All right, we have a problem. And they'll usually apply pressure.
Very interesting. So they're very sort of like Skinner-based type of management. They don't see the results, they don't see the behaviors, then they basically, use the metrics to say, okay, there's a delta, it's not happening, I wonder why, I'm going to have to talk to that person. So what you're saying is that there is another layer that they're not looking at. Could you talk to that more?
Well, how do we motivate this person? How do we get them toward motivated?
Yes.
What's going on in their world? How are they perceiving the manager, the environment of the company? Are they feeling really supported the way they need to be?
Yes.
In order to be more successful? Are they being encouraged and inspired?
Absolutely, yeah.
Many people in sales would say, no, I don't feel like I'm particularly encouraged or inspired at all.
Yes.
I just feel like I better produce.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to uncover all these other factors. That makes a lot of sense to me, and thank you for sharing that. I'd like us to then, going back to your early description on being a success coach and a business coach. And again, I want to focus on the sales clients that you have. And I'd love to understand if you use with them the business mentor or business success coach aspect, what are some of the things that maybe they glean from you that might help them sell better from that angle, from the angle of understanding business a bit more?
Well, understanding people is definitely part of it. When they go into a meeting, most of the time people prepare in advance. They'll check out a website. They know their own agenda. They know what they want to say about their product or their service.
Yes.
But they don't pay a lot of attention to the person at the other side of the table.
Yes, exactly.
And that's probably the poorest use of the time available. I think evaluating who we're dealing with and understanding their strategy for making decisions is far more valuable than knowing a script and diving into it.
Yes, exactly.
And yet most salespeople know their script really well.
And they just try to go in and try to execute against that script. So I think your guidance then is to hold off on that script, understand who you're talking with, understand what their concerns are, and as much as possible adjust to that versus just trying to get to the conclusion of a transaction.
Right. If you're sitting across from someone who wants to dive into the details immediately, they'll tell you. They'll show you. Within a few minutes, they'll be fidgeting in their chair. And if that's the case, okay, let's dive in. What would you like to learn most first?
Yes.
And let them tell you what that is.
So it's much more in response to the guidance that you're getting from that customer or client you're talking to.
Absolutely.
Very interesting. So I think then again, I think you have an amazing, unique combination of the corporate experience and now the coaching area. And again, I think this is going to be an interesting episode for people to understand the benefit of working with a coaching professional. And I'd love to maybe, just imagine if I am a sales account manager and you're trying to describe to me the sales coaching program that you have, and what it looks like, how does the engagement look like, and what would be the success factors you'd want from me in order to work with you?
What do I want to see in terms of success of the sales manager as a client?
Or initially maybe the sales account manager first as a client.
Okay. The first thing I would do is ask them what's most important to them, where are they heading, what are they encountering, Where would they like to be?
Yes.
What's most important to them? What's most valuable to them? What is their definition of success in their life? So I understand where they're seeing the world.
Yes. And I'm trying to kind of give people a sense of what that would look like. So it looks like it would be a number of calls that typically would happen with you. I mean, how do you sort of chunk it out over time?
Well, if they're in the same geography with me, I would probably meet with them. If they're outside of my geography, I would be on Zoom or Skype with them. Fortunately, I can do a lot of things in that medium like we're doing today.
Yes.
I can certainly send all kinds of things electronically for those proprietary assessments.
Yes.
Get the results back. And then we dive into their answers.
Fantastic.
And they're typically surprised by some of the results of their answers. But when they really start thinking about them, they go, oh, now I see. Okay. Now that's starting to make more sense to me.
Yes. Because then it's enlightening because they can see where the roadblocks could be coming from.
Yes.
Right? Because I think when you start talking about the behaviors and the habits, sometimes they could be, again, messing things up for us. But because we're so busy, we're not even conscious that they are happening. And then you and the coaching and the tools you're using to help us uncover and open up for us to see what those are. Right?
Yes. That's right.
Yeah. So does then the length of that coaching engagement differ depending on how much work needs to happen? I mean, how do you assess, hey, Ash, this is how much we need to work together versus maybe a longer for other situations? How do you sort of gauge the duration of the coaching engagement?
Part of it is the progress we make. And if the individual is really putting in the amount of energy and time they need to.
Yes.
Some people come from the land of good intentions. They intend to do things. And they say, well, I didn't quite get to it. I wanted to.
Yes.
So what do we do next? So a lot of times progress is gauged by the people I'm working with.
That makes a lot of sense because I think it's just like anything else. I think that, again, as you said earlier, the commitment will make a lot of difference, right? Have you had a chance that an opportunity to coach a group of people within a company, so it's more of a corporate client versus just an individual?
I have. I've done some corporate training recently, and in fact, I'm in the process of doing some currently with a financial advisory services firm, and they're very large in my region. And I'm working with a number of people, and they're all at different degrees of success in what they're doing.
Yes.
From millennials up to people who are probably in their 50s.
Yes.
And they're looking at the world very differently through their own eyes.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so relating to each of them during training it's a very interactive and engaging process for me.
You're working the group dynamics given that diversity, and then, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'd like to learn more, actually. I'm curious.
And so how they each describe what's going on in their world and what they like and what they dislike, what they fear, where their hopes are. It's quite different.
Yes.
But I see similar threads going across all of them.
Interesting. And so then your engagement with the with this financial advisory company, you're working with the group. Does the work entail individualized work as well in addition, or is it mostly right now it's mostly as a group?
They're all in a group, but then I ask them to, as a takeaway, to go do something that I will ask them to do. And what I've discovered about most people, Ash, and you may have discovered this too along your path, most people are not clear on what they really want to be, do, or have.
Interesting, yeah.
And because of that lack of clarity, it impacts every area of their life, including their success in sales.
That's a good point. Absolutely. It will be obvious that you think people have answers for those things, but typically a lot of the time, unless something stops them to do that reflection, that they typically almost like an autopilot a lot of the time, right?
Right.
And that is a huge challenge. And I think to your point, then your intervention is really about doing a pause and having the reflection and then going through the discussions that you go with them. So I was glad that we brought that up, because I think people listening to this then will get an idea that Leslie and other professionals like Leslie can actually do this with their teams and help their teams sort of unlock some of those clarity issues, and then get through, what are the habits or the limiting beliefs that are in their way, and then get to hopefully some type of a breakthrough that then will make a difference, right?
The breakthrough is critical.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if you've ever had a major breakthrough in your life, but if you ever have, you know how impactful and wonderful that can feel. I had one 7 years ago, and it was amazing to me, because prior to that, I didn't really even understand what that would look like, let alone feel like.
Yes.
And in my case, I used to be a yo-yo dieter, like 67% of all adults in America.
Yes.
And I woke up one day ready to do my umpteenth diet, and I said, this is crazy.
Yes.
I'm going to stop. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to find out what's going on, because I can lose all the weight I want. I can't sustain the weight loss over time.
Yes. Interesting. Yeah.
Well, I just said, I'll do whatever it takes to stop this. And
That determination at that moment.
that's when I discovered the value of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming.
Yes.
And I went to somebody who was very good at it around dieting. And after 4 sessions, in 4 short sessions,
Yes.
I went from having an ongoing problem to ending it forever. I went on my final diet. I lost all the weight. I became a kickboxer. And now I'm in the top 1% of fitness.
That is unbelievably phenomenal. In just 4 sessions of going through that process.
Yes. But I said I will do whatever it takes. I was completely toward motivated to make it happen. And I think for most people, they're not quite there most of the time. But I sure was. I was done with that.
That is amazing. That's amazing. And I know that's huge, because to your point, it can be years before we get to a pivotal moment where we have to get to that point. When you work with your clients, do you sometimes try to go through a process by which they will experience that transformation or the breakthrough?
If they are open to it, absolutely. But it's always a function. It's not fairy dust. I wish it were, so I could just sprinkle it on somebody and they would be absolutely happy, and everything in their life would work right.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. When I work with someone, if they're highly motivated, if they're ready to say, I'll do whatever it takes, and they mean it,
Yes.
then we can make rapid strides. And they'll do the work. They'll do what they need to do to keep moving forward. And that is the optimum situation in working with anybody.
Fantastic. We're doing really well on time. I want to maybe ask you one more question, and maybe there's a question on your mind that I should have asked and I didn't. I'd love to uncover that. So I'll go ahead and ask my final question, which has to do with, as people are listening, I can definitely, given the fact that we talked about your corporate background, your coaching work, my curiosity now is about, what's the most common issue you find that people have in unlocking their potential, that you come across, say, I've seen it before. I'd love to understand if there's one thing that you discovered that is typically, kind of locking people away from achieving amazing potential.
Well, that's a great question, and it's a very insightful question.
Yeah.
I think the best way to give you an answer would be to say, what do the top 1% in anything
Yes.
have that's different from everyone else? And it's a series of things. It begins with their identity, the way they view themselves.
Yes.
And their potential and their desire. It's a burning desire to fulfill that potential. They literally can fail their way into success because they're unafraid.
Yes.
Look at Elon Musk. he's willing to take every risk possible, and he's always telling his employees, I want to see more failure around here. Now, how often do you hear the CEO of a company say that? But he means it every time.
Yeah.
So it's the identity first. How do I really view myself? And the top 1% are very clear on how they do that. They know what that identity is.
Yes.
Now, what are my values? What do I really value the most?
Yes.
And a lot of people don't know the answer to that. But the top 1% do. They're very clear on their values.
Yes.
Always. From that, you get down to their beliefs. What do they believe in, at least professionally?
Yes.
What do they really believe in? What's important to them?
Yes.
And they've got all of that dialed in. Then they cultivate the right skills, which entails specialization.
Exactly.
Generalists generally don't do very well. Specialists do. And then that in turn drives their behaviors, which are those habits.
Very interesting. Yeah.
And creates the environment.
So in a sense, then you're basically saying the best thing for a lot of people to do is actually adopt that top 1% mindset, identity, values, beliefs, and then actions. That is the ultimate in sort of, it's almost like what you were just saying earlier about your own experience. It's you got to make that decision that it's going to be different from now on, right?
Yes.
And then you adopt this list of things you've just listed.
It's like me. I have never been on a diet since I did that final diet. Yes. I never gain weight. I get on the scale every single morning. And if I'm up even 1 pound, I eat differently for the day. I've never been on a diet since.
That's it. Yeah. I'm fascinated. Fascinating. Congratulations, Leslie. When you told me that story, I was just so happy for you. That's awesome. So let's see if there's a question that I should have asked that you'd love to talk about and share with the audience.
Well, one question would be, why do so many people fail to take real action?
Beats me. I agree with you. That's a very good question. Yes.
And it's because internally, something is literally, it's an invisible barrier that is literally holding them back. And because it's invisible, they're wondering, why am I failing to take real action? I know that I should.
Yes.
I suspect I could.
Yeah.
Why am I not?
But I'm not doing it. So then I'll ask examples of that sort of invisible barrier. Is it sort of fear of failure? Is it my family never expected me to go that high? What are some examples you saw?
One could be a scarcity mindset. Okay. A lot of people can take their income up to a certain level.
Yes.
And that's about it. Then it'll go down a little bit. Then it'll go right back up to that little threshold, and it kind of stays right in there year after year after year.
Yes.
That's about a scarcity versus an abundance mindset. I encounter that a lot. For some people, it's fear of success. Wow, if I become much more successful, what will other people think about me? What will my wife think of me? What will my family think of me? What will my friends think of me?
Exactly. Right.
So they have an approval dependence.
That's how you call it. Okay, approval dependence. Okay.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Some people have a fear of failure. Oh, I couldn't stand to fail at anything. So I'm not going to take much risk.
Exactly, yeah.
I'm just going to kind of cruise along.
Yeah, stay within a specific limit, yeah.
Some people are terrified of change. They don't like change. They like their little comfortable routine.
Yes.
And many people have a very small comfort zone. And you get them too far away from it, and they'll break out in a sweat. And they really get very, very unhappy. So when I start seeing that happen for somebody, I think, okay, now I know where they're at.
And then you basically slowly but surely take them through that in order to take them to the other side.
Yes. Most people are unaware of what's really going on inside.
Yeah.
And they are playing these scripts from childhood and growing up from authority figures. And some of it's great, some of it not so much so.
Exactly.
But they're living it.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating. And I can definitely relate to everything you were talking about just now. So you may hear from me after the podcast. But I want the audience to know how, if somebody's interested to reach out and work with you, where would you like to send them?
Well, there's a couple of places they can go. Of course, one is my website,
yes,
which is unleashedsuccess.com.
Fantastic.
And, they can also find me on LinkedIn, Leslie Horton in, the Sacramento region. And now that they've seen what I look like, they'll recognize my picture, I think, very quickly.
Fantastic, yes.
So those would be two avenues. They could also call me if they prefer that, or send me an email. Very open to any of those.
Fantastic. Wonderful, Leslie. This has been very insightful. I think people are going to get a very good sense of what it means to work with a coach, and you're giving them not only with individuals in general, but sales professionals in particular, as well as people who are sales managers as well. So I think I loved that we gave them that vantage point, plus the fact that you can also work with teams as well. It's been a pleasure having you here on the show, and I'm very grateful for the time we had together. And I'm sure our audience will just find a lot of benefit. And I'll make sure that on the description, we'll make sure we include your links in there for people to reach out to your website or to the LinkedIn profile as well. Thank you so much for being here.
And I thank you so much for inviting me, Ash. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and I'm very impressed with all of the things you've accomplished in your career.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Top 1% Sellers Factory podcast. Give us your suggestions and guest recommendations by emailing us at ash@connectwithash.com. Thank you also for sharing this podcast with your colleagues and social media contacts. To connect with us on LinkedIn, please send a connect request to ash@connectwithash.com. See you at our next episode. Thanks for tuning in.